It is the year 2025, and I'd like to welcome you to a video series that we'll be calling the Columbus Family Virtual Toy Museum. In everyone's lives, we experience transformative moments, times when something happens that changes our lives fundamentally. One of these moments for me happened when I was in grade school, and winning a contest at school, I received as a prize several packs of baseball cards for the first time in my life. And I remember opening those and coming to understand how they were part of a set and something that you could collect. And that has set my life on a course of being a collector. So over the years, I've collected baseball cards, hockey cards, moved on to comic books, and later action figures and toys. And that's mostly what this video series is going to focus on. Over the years, I've collected many toy lines. One of my main focuses is Transformers. I also have G.I. Joes, superhero action figures, many Lego minifigures, some Gundams, and many other toy lines as well. So over the course of these videos, I'm going to be presenting what I have in my collection and talking a little bit about each item. And hopefully this is something that people will find interesting and as exciting as I do. So whether you're a collector yourself or just interested in toys and related items, hopefully you'll find this interesting. So one thing we'll be focusing on in these videos a lot is the G1 Transformers. So when Transformers came out in 1984, they were just the Transformers. But there have been many follow-on series, new animated series, movies, and so on since then. And so the original Transformers have come to be known as the G1 Transformers. G1 Transformers started coming out in 1984 and came out in several waves over the next 5 to 7 years or so. This is an original G1 Perceptor. As you can see, some of the older ones, a little bit dusty, a little bit scraped up from being played with as a toy when I was a child. Starting in the early 2000s, Hasbro began re-releasing new versions of these same Transformers using the original molds, and so this was a chance to get newer, less dusty versions of the same Transformers, or get Transformers that you never had a chance to get when you were a kid. Years after that, they started recreating the G1 Transformers and coming up with newer versions of the toys themselves, but using the same original characters that came out of the G1 series. And over the years, they have produced many of these. Not every single Transformer that was available in the G1 toys, but a lot of them. And I have a lot of them to show off. So we'll be going through each one in turn in the order that they originally came out in the paper catalogs from the 1980s, and starting in 1984. And I'll be talking some about the characters, their appearances in the TV show and the movies, and what the toys are and what they look like, getting some information from various guidebooks that I have on Transformers collecting, as well as the truly astonishing Transformers More Than Meets the Eye guide from Dreamwave Studios that has in-depth bios of all or almost all of the original G1 Transformers. So that's what we're going to be looking at first. When the original G1 Transformers were released in 1984, they came with a paper catalog, and for many years the catalogs had sort of the similar format where one side would be Autobots and one side would be Decepticons. And what's nice about the old paper catalogs from a collector standpoint is that they gave every Transformer a number. So we can go through them year by year and number by number. And so the first Transformer from 1984, Autobot side number 1, was this one, Brawn. Maybe not who you were expecting to be the very first Transformer. This is a reissue of Brawn that was in the form of a keychain that was done some years ago, but it shows what the original Brawn toy looked like. This is the first re-implementation of Brawn that was done. It came out in 2008, and it's pretty good as far as matching his look in the G1 cartoon. And more recently, 2023, they came out with this much nicer, larger version of Brawn that is very close to how he looked in the cartoon. His bio, Brawn, gives his motto, which every one of the G1 Transformers had on their packaging, as might over microchips. And Brawn was frequently seen in the original G1 cartoon. I don't know that he had any sort of standout episodes, but he was always very eager to battle and fight the Decepticons. Now, I've seen him described as being the strongest Transformer, which kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense given that he is one of the smaller ones, and you would expect someone like Omega Supreme or Metroplex to be much smaller than Brawn, but perhaps they mean pound for pound the strongest Transformer. But we'll put him in the Smurfs club of someone whose name tells you pretty much everything that you need to know about the character. Okay, the second Transformer from 1984, Autobots number 2, is a much more familiar face, and that is, of course, Bumblebee. Some of the toys we have here, this is actually an original from 1984 Bumblebee, toy that I had as a child. Here is a re-implementation from 2006 from the very first re-implementation line of toys that Hasbro did. And also notable is another one here from 2008 that was done at a smaller size. I also have various keychains, a reissue that was done, and also a hand-painted by me mini of Bumblebee. Now, Bumblebee was one of the most frequently seen Transformers in the original G1 cartoon. He was one of the weakest Autobots, but never lacked for courage or, was always ready to go into battle against the Decepticons. He almost served as a kind of point of view character for children watching the show, given that he was so much weaker and less dangerous than a lot of the other Transformers. Of course, he's become very famous now, being featured in the live action movies, and is the only Transformer to have his own movie. Bumblebee has appeared in a lot of different incarnations of the Transformers cartoons that have come out after G1, including Earthspark and Animated and Transformers Prime. So there are a lot of different versions of Bumblebee out there. There's usually one to be found on the shelves at a local toy store. I also have here the Transformers Lego version of Bumblebee. This is the second one that Lego has put out, the first one being Optimus Prime. It's pretty cool. And Bumblebee's motto was the least likely can be the most dangerous, and that kind of sums up how Bumblebee was portrayed in the G1 cartoon series. Next on the list, Autobot number 3 is Huffer. Here is an original G1 Huffer figure, and here is a re-implementation that was done on a smaller scale, and here's a nice one that has come out recently that is done on a much larger scale. Huffer transformed into a construction type or semi truck vehicle, and his function is listed as construction engineer, and his motto is molecular structure is the key to success. Now there's some words to live by. Huffer was frequently seen in the G1 cartoon. He was kind of the whiner of the Autobots, always complaining and unhappy about something. His one sort of moment of glory came when he got to pull Optimus Prime's trailer in one episode when he was injured. But other than that, Huffer pretty much just a whiner. Next up, we have Autobot number 4, Cliff Jumper. Now, here is a reissue of the G1 form of Cliff Jumper that was done as a keychain. And Cliff Jumper is notable for his similarities to Bumblebee in his transformation mechanic in his G1 form. I also have a couple of larger scale Cliff Jumpers. This one is modeled after his appearance on Transformers Prime. It has a very Prime-like face. This one is also modeled on his appearance in Prime, particularly in vehicle form, although the head and face are more similar to what they would look like in G1 form. Cliff Jumper was frequently seen in the G1 cartoon. He was always eager to get into battle against the Decepticons, and he's appeared in a number of other cartoons and series for the Transformers, but most notably in Transformers Prime, where he was very prominent for the first few episodes before he was zombified and destroyed. His primary function is listed as warrior, and his motto is strike first, strike fast, and strike hard. But mostly he is probably known for being similar to Bumblebee. Cliff Jumper has also featured prominently in the current Transformers comic book, which is right now being published by Skybound. So we'll see where his story arc goes and what happens to him there. Autobot number 5 is Windcharger. Here is an original G1 version of Windcharger. Very simple transformation mechanic into his sports car mode. I have also a reissue of the same one in keychain form. As you've probably noticed, many of these original Autobot mini cars have been reissued in. Here's a version of Windcharger that came out in 2015, but I prefer this version that came out in 2010, just because it's a little bit, I think, nicer than the newer version, and a little bit bulkier. Windcharger He is listed as being a warrior, and his motto, quick action equals quick victory. Windcharger showed up fairly frequently on the original G1 cartoon, although I don't recall him being featured prominently in any episodes. But he is notable for having a special ability, which is that he could create a powerful magnetic field and could manipulate objects using that field, which is something that came into play in several episodes. All right, Autobot number 6, and rounding out the first wave of Autobot mini cars is Gears. Here we have an original G1 version of Gears, and like many of the mini cars, it's a very simple transformation mechanic, and Gears turns into something like a little pickup truck. In 2014, this version of Gears came out as his first re-implementation, and just last year, 2024, came out this much nicer version of Gears, which was difficult to find, but I finally got my hands on one, so lucky in that regard. Gears did appear frequently on the original G1 cartoon, and he was kind of the grumpy Transformer. Not a whiner like Huffer, but similarly unhappy about things and letting everyone know it. His function is transport and reconnaissance, and his motto is nobody wins a war, somebody loses. Again, pretty grumpy. There was an episode of the G1 cartoon that was singularly focused on Gears. It was called Changing Gears, and they tried to make him into a happier, friendlier version of himself, but it didn't stick, and by the end of the episode, he was back to his normal grumpy self. Another notable moment for Gears, in the original Transformers comic book that came out in the 1980s, was published by Marvel Comics, and the very first few episodes were actually set within the Marvel universe. Later, it would kind of become its own universe and didn't feature any familiar Marvel characters at that time. But in those first few episodes, there were a few references to Marvel Comics and an appearance by Spider-Man. And Spider-Man and Gears actually became good friends for a little while before Spider-Man, not understanding Cybertronian physiology, thought that Gears was destroyed, but he was later repaired and was just fine. And here we have collected together the 6 Transformers that we've looked at so far, 1984 G1 Autobot minicars. The oldest of these, in terms of when the toys were made, was Bumblebee from 2006, and the most recent is Gears from 2024. And it's nice to finally be able to collect and display them on a similar size scale. Now, in the 1984 catalog, these were listed as minicars. Next, we'll be looking at the Autobots in the section listed as cars. So, why were there minicars and cars? Why were they not all made to the same scale? The reason is that in Japan, where these toys were originally released by the company Takara, they were from different toy lines. When Hasbro in the United States licensed these toys and their models from Takara, they joined the different toy lines together and branded them all as Autobots or Decepticons, and gave them their character names and backgrounds so as to make a sort of more cohesive unit and something that they could create a cartoon around. Now, we'll see, especially when we get into the Decepticons from 1984, how different one toy is from another in terms of what it is and what its scale is. But the consistent theme that is necessary to become a Transformer is you have to be able to turn from a robot into something else. In a number of the videos that I've done so far, you may have noticed a short annotation with some of the Transformers in the form of G1-cat followed by a number. What this is a Transformers taxonomy system that I've developed. Some years ago, I was sort of faced with the question of how many Transformers do I have? And in a lot of ways, it's not a simple question to answer, not as simple as you might think it was. So I've developed this system to account for Transformers from the original catalogs, Transformers from the show, from other sources, from the cartoons, from the movies. And over the course of these videos, I'll be showing and explaining exactly how this taxonomy system works. But so far, we have only looked at the Transformers that appear by name in the paper catalogs from the 1980s, and that's what we'll continue to look at, although I'll enter in some of the other types of sources of Transformers and discuss how they affect the taxonomy as we go forward. In front of us are a few of the Transformers that fall into this category, all from the G1 era, but not appearing in the paper catalogs, or at least not by name. So this distinction will become clearer as we move forward. So returning to the paper catalogs, the next section that we find on the Autobots side of the 1984 catalog is the Cars section. And the first car listed there is Wheeljack. Here is an original G1 Wheeljack figure. And it is, like many of these, relatively simple and straightforward to transform. And yes, indeed, he transforms into a car. Now, there have been a number of Wheeljack toys made subsequently. Here is one remake of Wheeljack, and here is the one that I keep in my main collection. Wheeljack features a very kind of distinctive appearance, notable for this sort of circular face shield that he has and the wings on the sides of his head, as well as these that kind of stick up from his back. Here is a Wheeljack from the Earthspark series, which features a very simple transformation, and then you see a lot of the same features. In the original G1 cartoon, because he didn't have a mouth to animate, his side wings would light up when he spoke. Wheeljack was one of kind of the brain trust of the Autobots team, and he functioned as the team's kind of mad scientist. He was always coming up with inventions, or was the first person kind of looked to for technical solutions to problems that the Autobots faced. His primary function is listed as mechanical engineer, and his motto is never do what your enemy expects you to do. Wheeljack appeared in the Transformers Prime cartoon, although he was more of a warrior than an engineer in that version of the cartoon. And as you see, also appeared in Earthspark as well. So a very different version of Wheeljack in Armada, where he was an Autobot who deserted and became a Decepticon. But that's kind of another version of Wheeljack. Perhaps his most notable accomplishment in the original G1 cartoon is with the assistance of Ratchet. It was him who created the Dinobots. And so, in that continuity at least, we have Wheeljack to thank for that. Second on the list of Autobot cars is this one, Trailbreaker. Um, we have here first a smaller version of Trailbreaker that was initially released, and then a much nicer, larger version of Trailbreaker that was released later. Trailbreaker transforms into a minivan, I guess, is the best way of describing it. And Trailbreaker was frequently seen in the early episodes in the G1 cartoon. Often he served as transportation for the Autobots' human companions. His primary function is listed as defensive strategist, and his motto is, "An Autobot's as good as the fuel in his tank." Now, Trailbreaker is notable for a couple of reasons. For one thing, he did have the special ability to create a powerful force field, and this came into play in a number of the episodes. Another thing that needs to be mentioned when we talk about Trailbreaker is the idea of name changes. So, when the original Transformers came back out, they had a certain set of names. When they were reissued or remade, there were often cases where they were given a new, different, or slightly different name, and Trailbreaker is one example of this. This toy, when it was released, came out with the name of Trail Cutter. Now, sometimes this is done, I believe, due to licensing or copyright issues, trademark issues, where a name that the Hasbro could use in the 80s is no longer available to them, and they choose a different name. Interestingly, there's a Trailbreaker that's come out just recently, and it's again named Trailbreaker. So sometimes the pattern is not always consistent. In one of the comic book series, it is actually the Autobot Whirl who gives Trailbreaker the suggestion to change his name to Trail Cutter to give himself more of an edge. But what it is that drives name changes is probably something that varies on a case-by-case basis. The next of the Autobot cars to look at is the one known as Ironhide. This is a reissue, in part, of the original G1 Ironhide toy, and this part transformed into kind of a truck bed, and this part was the back of the truck or the cab, and it transformed into this type of battle platform. Now, I have a couple of newer versions. Here is a smaller version of Ironhide, and here is a larger version of Ironhide from my main collection. There have been a few other versions that have been put out, but this is the one that I've kind of stuck with. I also have here another type of toy that is an official Transformers product. This is known as a block ease, and I have this for Ironhide. It's actually something you assemble yourself. It's mostly ball and socket joints. while it is funny to have a transformer that doesn't transform, it is nice with these the amount of posability that you have and the way that you can display them in a number of different dynamic poses. Ironhide, his function is listed as security, and his motto is high-tech circuitry is no replacement for guts. Ironhide was frequently seen on the original G1 cartoon, often as kind of Optimus Prime's right-hand man, and his motto kind of sums up his attitude. He's kind of portrayed as an older veteran type, kind of a no-nonsense, and coiner of the term Decepticreeps. He did have something of a special ability where he could produce different liquids from out of his hands, and these would have different effects. Now, within my collection, there are certain Transformers that I just like a lot, either because I had the toy as a child or wanted the toy, or I just like the character. And this is sort of my ring of honor of the Transformers. Ironhide is definitely one of these, as he was, one of my favorites from watching the cartoons back then. Our next Autobot car is Ratchet. Here is a reissue of a G1 version of Ratchet, along with his battle platform. Here is a smaller version of a Ratchet toy, and here is the Ratchet version that I use in my main collection. Now, Ratchet, again, was someone who appeared a lot in the G1 cartoon, and his function as another member of the Autobots Brain Trust was in a medical or capacity as a doctor. As Autobots were damaged in their fights against the Decepticons, usually it was Ratchet who would be the one repairing them. His function is listed as medic, and his motto is, "You break it, I'll remake it." It's kind of natural, therefore, that Ratchet transforms into an ambulance, and there are several ambulances to be found in the original G1 toys, and most of them have some sort of medical function. Ratchet was also featured prominently in Transformers Prime as maybe a little bit older and more crotchety version of a doctor, and also appeared as one of the characters in the first live-action Transformers film. So as we looked at the Ironhide and Ratchet figures, you will no doubt have noticed that they are very similar, and in fact, exactly the same mold. And this phenomenon has come to be known as a redeco or redecoration. And that's where Hasbro takes a particular mold for one Transformer and presents another version of that in a different color scheme, and this functions as a separate character. Now, there are often some other slight differences between one version of a redeco and another. For example, between Ironhide and Ratchet, you can see with Ratchet there's added the lights for the top of the ambulance form. Now, the original G1 Ironhide and Ratchet were redeco, and the same is true in this line that I use in my main collection, where, again, they were a redeco. And this is often the case, but not always the case, that if they were redeco in the original one, that happens later. There are other examples where characters that were not a redeco from G1 are presented as a redeco in their remakes later. Now, you may be asking, what about Bumblebee and Cliffjumper? Weren't they a redeco and actually the first one? Well, despite their similarities, if you look closely, you can see they're actually not exactly the same. In the end, Bumblebee features kind of a more rounded and Cliffjumper just a different shape. So they were not actually a true redeco. And Bumblebee is representative of a Volkswagen Beetle, whereas Cliffjumper was modeled on a different type of car. However, in many of the following series of figures that Hasbro has put out, Bumblebee and Cliffjumper have been presented as redecos, again, based on their obvious similarities. Now, two other things I wanted to point out in terms of Ratchet and Ironhide. I see the original toys actually look a little bit strange in that they don't really have a face. It's kind of hidden here behind the windshield. In very early issues of the Marvel 1980s Transformers comic, they did look exactly like their action figures, but in the cartoon, they looked more like what you see here, with their chest being their windshield and having a head and body kind of on top of that. But this is how they appeared in the original toys, and this appearance was made for the cartoon to make them look a little bit less strange, and then that appearance was later adopted by the comic as well. The reissues of Ironhide and Ratchet came with a cardboard insert that you could stick over and in this area of the toy, and their head would show on top of that, looking like it did in the cartoon. But I prefer to keep them kind of the way they originally appeared. The other thing I wanted to note is the Oregon on this Ironhide's license plate, which is a reference to the fact that in the G1 cartoon, the Transformers, the Autobots, and their ship, the Ark, was crashed in Mount St. Helens in Oregon, and that's what they used as their base throughout at least the first season of the cartoon. The next Autobot car that we'll look at is this one called Hound. Here is a remake of Hound that I have in my main collection. Hound transforms into a sort of military-style Jeep, as you can see here in this smaller version. Now, Hound was very frequently seen in at least the first season of the G1 Transformers cartoon, and he had the special ability to project holograms or illusions, and this is an ability that factored into really a number of episodes and was quite frequently used ability. His primary function is listed as Scout, and his motto is observe everything and remember even more. When Dreamwave came out with the first Transformers comic book seen since the 80s, Hound was actually the first Transformer who appeared in vehicle form in that comic. So that's kind of a cool distinction that he has. The next Autobot car that we'll look at is another from my Transformers Ring of Honor, and that is Mirage. Now, I had a Mirage toy as a child. Part of his transformation mechanic was that he turned in the middle, and like many Mirages, he eventually snapped in half, and I no longer have him. But here's a Mirage remake, and this is one of the oldest Transformers remakes from the first line, back all the way back in 2006. Mirage has been done a few times since then. This particular version of Mirage comes from a series that appeared on Netflix, and you see he's actually in disguise as a Decepticon. And this version is a recoloration of this one, which is a G2 version of Mirage. We'll talk more about G2 later. I also have this version of Mirage, which is non-transforming. It's from a line of retro toys that, it's very basic and simple, but in terms of evoking the nostalgia of the appearance of the Transformers from this time period, it's spot on. In the original G1 cartoon, Mirage had a special ability, which was that he could turn invisible. And this sort of box would appear around him, and then he'd disappear. As I mentioned in this later series, he had more of a disguise capability. But his invisibility came in handy in a number of episodes and saved the Autobots, from the Decepticons more than once. His function is listed as spy or counterintelligence, and his motto is, "Who and what I am, I hide from the enemy." I always liked the appearance of Mirage's head in this sort of almost Egyptian-looking style of head, and I always thought that was cool. A version of Mirage appeared in one of the live-action movies voiced by Pete Davidson. So there you go. That's Mirage. So obviously, I really like the Transformers, and there are a lot of Transformers that I especially like, but having one favorite, that is the next Autobot we're talking about, and that is Sunstreaker. Now, the defining characteristic of Sunstreaker's personality is really vanity and his care about his own appearance, and that's not why I love him. It's because I had a Sunstreaker toy as a child. This is an original from 1984, and I just have so many sort of fond memories of getting this toy and playing with this toy. And he is one of the more visually appealing of the Transformers, particularly in his very sweet car mode. Here's a remake of Sunstreaker from my main Transformers collection. And here's another toy that was made based off of the designs for a short segment in the Transformers Bumblebee movie that took place on Cybertron. So here is a version of that Sunstreaker in a robot mode. And here is the same one in vehicle mode. My own son had his birthday just a few days ago, and he got this Sunstreaker for it. So, Transformers Generations lives on. Sunstreaker's function is listed as warrior, and his motto is, "They can't beat the best," which sums up Sunstreaker's personality perfectly. Sunstreaker was seen from time to time in the G1 cartoon, really just kind of reinforcing that aspect of his personality, but he was one of the stronger Autobot warriors. Beyond that, he played a pretty significant role in one of the IDW Transformers series, comic book series, was kind of a tragic role, and he gets deconstructed and then reconstructed and all of that. But for Sunstreaker fans, it's nice to see him a bit in the spotlight. There is a nice little Easter egg on his license plate that says "We are 84," which is super cool. Also, but yeah, Sunstreaker, my favorite Transformer of all time. Our next Autobot car is Jazz. Here is a reissue of a G1 Jazz, and here is a smaller version of Jazz with a very simple one-step transformation mechanic. And here is the main Jazz that I use in my main Transformers collection. Now, Jazz also was frequently seen in the G1 cartoon. He was kind of the cool Autobot. He was very interested in Earth culture and hanging out with the humans, and had his own sense of style. In fact, his motto is do it with style or don't bother doing it. Um, and his function is listed as Special Operations Agent. Jazz was one of the Autobots featured in the first live action film, and although he did perish in that film, I did kind of like the portrayal and how they kind of showed that he was the cool Autobot. Our next Autobot car is Sideswipe. Here is a reissue of a G1 Sideswipe, and I also have a Sideswipe in his Blockies form, as well as this Sideswipe from my main collection. And I'd also like to mention this version of Sideswipe that I have. This comes from a different line of Transformers toys, which I've seen on Amazon, called the Commander series, but I'm not sure what that denotes. These you can usually find at Walgreens, is where they're sold. And they're a bit larger in size and simpler to transform, and that makes them great toys if you're looking for Transformers toys for someone to play with. Um, and they're also very true in appearance to the original G1s, which is something that I like about them as well. There's only a few of these that have been made, 6 or 7, and it's something that I wish that we could see more of, because, like I said, they do make, I think, excellent toys, and I'm always interested in seeing more things that are kind of referencing the original G1 Transformer. So this is Sideswipe in his vehicle form. Now, his function is listed as Warrior, and his motto is, I don't break rules, I bend them a lot. Sideswipe was seen quite frequently in the original Transformers, but I don't know that he had a very notable personality. He was interesting that he was often referenced as being brothers with Sunstreaker, although it's unclear exactly what makes two Transformers brothers, as opposed to any other Transformers. Sideswipe was also one of the main characters in the cartoon Transformers Animated, where he had a bit more of a lawbreaker type of personality. So that might be the place to look if you're interested in seeing more of Sideswipe. Our next Autobot car is Blue Streak. In terms of toys, Here is a reissue of an original G1 Blue Streak toy. I also have this smaller version of a Blue Streak remake, as well as this larger, much nicer version from my main collection. And then I do also have a nice Blue Streak blockies as well. Blue Streak, his function is listed as Gunner, and his motto is, "I never met a Decepticon I didn't dislike." Blue Streak was seen from time to time in the original G1 cartoon. He was pretty much a functional warrior on the Autobots, and other than that, didn't really factor in to things a whole lot. He's another Autobot that has experienced name changes. So while Blue Streak was the original G1 name, in later days he's been seen referred to as Silver Streak instead, which kind of makes sense considering there isn't really a whole lot of blue in his coloration. But if we could step outside of our literal minds, I don't think that the name Blue Streak was necessarily meant to refer to his actual color. So that is Blue Streak. Next we have the Autobot Prowl. Prowl is the first Autobot to be modeled after a police car, but he won't be the last. This is a reissue of a G1 Prowl, and here is a smaller version remake of Prowl, and a Prowl from the Commander line, where he has his own Autobot / police insignia, police badge. And here's a remake of Prowl from my main collection. I've always thought that Prowl was one of the coolest looking of the original G1 Transformers, just as far as how overall appearance goes. His function is listed as military analyst strategist, and his motto is "Logic is the ultimate weapon." And often he is portrayed very much in line with that motto, being a highly logical, almost unfeeling type of transformer, almost an Autobot counterpart to Shockwave, who's also very logical and unfeeling. Prowl is often seen as one of Optimus Prime's right-hand men and one of his primary lieutenants. And he does factor in to a lot of the comics stories. There's even an arc where he becomes a part of the combiner of the Decepticons of Devastator. So that's a little bit strange, but still, I think Prowl one of the best of the G1 Autobots. So finally, we come to the final Autobot from the 1984 G1 catalog, which is none other than Optimus Prime. Now, Optimus Prime is one of the most well-known and enduring Transformers characters. I can't think of any version of the Transformers in comics, movies, all of the cartoons, where Optimus Prime is not present and, a major, usually central character to the story. In terms of toys, he has been made and made and made again. And I have quite a lot of Optimus Prime toys. I'm, in fact, going to do a separate video showing another section of my collection, which is just Optimus Primes. Some of the ones that I have here, this is the main Optimus Prime that I use in my collection. I have him on a larger scale, but this one seems to fit in best with the rest of the main collection, seen here with, as he often is, his Energon axe from one of the early episodes of the cartoon. Separately, I have his trailer here in his transformed mode, and his drone roller. This is a Optimus Prime from a toy line called YOLO Park. I have just a couple of these, but they're very nice in terms of posability, although they don't transform. Similarly, I have the Rad version of Optimus Prime. These were sold at Walmart's, also very posable and not transformable. I also have Optimus Prime as a koosh ball here, and as I said, I'll film a separate video to show a whole bunch more Optimus Prime toys. In the guidebook here, he is listed as the Autobots commander, which he is, and his motto is "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings." A motto that may be the only motto that's actually used in the live-action Transformers movies, but he does say that at one point. There's a lot that you could say about Optimus Prime. I just want to share kind of one of my favorite moments from the G1 cartoon that just kind of shows his leadership style and what I think makes him, such a great leader. There was an episode where the Decepticons had infected Perceptor with a type of virus, and they were hoping that the Autobots would, touch him and become infected. But they did rig him up to explode, and Optimus Prime doesn't hesitate. He just goes and saves Perceptor and says, we'll figure out the virus thing later. That's just the kind of commander that he is, valuing his people and trusting his team to be able to handle, whatever they might need to handle. So that's one of my favorite Optimus Prime moments. And stay tuned for more Optimus Prime toys. Okay, as promised, here is a display that I have of various Optimus Prime toys. We'll go through and name them all, but some of the main ones that you can see, here's a very nice scale version of Optimus Prime, and here's one that was done a while ago that I thought was very just aligned with the G1 look before many of those had come out. Here's a reissue of the original 1984 G1 Optimus Prime, and here is the Lego version. This was the first Lego Transformer officially that was made. Again, you see his Energon axe there. I do have a pop version of Optimus Prime and a stuffy version of Optimus Prime. And this is perhaps the most elaborate one, which was a anniversary version of Optimus Prime. It's very large, and it has a very complicated transformation, but it does have some light and sound effects that also make it pretty cool. But that was from a while ago. Oh yeah, and the best thing is if you press the back of his head, his face plate will move like he's talking in the cartoon. So that's definitely the best feature of that. Oh, one of the newer things here is one of these Hot Wheels that's been done as an Optimus Prime. These have just started to come out recently, and they're very cool. If you like Hot Wheels and you like Transformers, finally having some Hot Wheels Transformers is definitely awesome. So yeah, Optimus Prime, He's been done a lot in toy form, and I don't try to get every single one that comes out just because there are so many. But when I see one that I like, that's something that I'm going to add to my collection. Building a taxonomy system for the Transformers has presented a number of interesting and unique challenges. It's not as straightforward of an exercise as you might expect. So far, we've looked at Transformers that are explicitly named and listed within the G1 paper catalogs. There are other Transformers from this era that don't appear by name in the catalog, and I've had to develop a system for identifying and tracking those as well. The first to come along is this one, Roller, who comes with Optimus Prime in G1 form. He is a separate Transformer, although he doesn't transform. He does appear in the cartoon and is named as Roller at least once, but that's enough to classify him as his own entity and his own Transformer. But I can't put him in the catalog listings because he doesn't appear by name in the catalog. So what I've done for Transformers like this that are included with another Transformer, and Roller's only the first. There are many, many that fall into this category. I've created a subcategory using INC for included. So Roller, being the first, gets the designation of G1 INC 001. And as you'll see, there will be quite a few of these. Some just happen to come along with another toy. Others are a subclass of, accessory type Transformers, Headmasters, Target Masters, things of that like. And so that's what we'll start to see filling in the INC category. Before we move on from the 1984 Autobots, I did want to show this combiner here, which goes by the name of Optimus Maximus. Now, in the original cartoon series and comic book, Optimus Prime was not a combiner, and none of these Transformers were. The first appearance that I'm aware of Optimus Maximus was in the IDW comic book, where there were just a bunch of Transformers that were starting to combine together. But Optimus Maximus here features Optimus Prime as the center, along with Sunstreaker, Mirage, Prowl, and Ironhide of the G1 1984 Transformers, and also a Hot Rod or Rodimus character who is going to appear later. I like this a lot because it features so many of my personal favorite Autobot Transformers, even though it's not something where Optimus Prime was a combiner in G1. It's still a very impressive looking figure, and I like it for that reason. Now, you will notice that Optimus Prime is not his usual red and blue coloring, but rather a bit white in color. And there's a reason for this that we'll discuss when we get deeper into some of the later Transformers to come out. But this is, a pretty cool toy and display, and Optimus Maximus. And here we have collected every Autobot from the 1984 catalog of the Transformers. It's taken almost 20 years to put this collection together, and it's taken about another 60 minutes to get them to all stand up at the same time. So it's a pretty cool display, and as a collector, it's just great to be able to put something like this together to represent, you know, the toys and the characters that I loved from, you know, being a child in the 80s. And here is an almost equivalent display of the 1984 toys, either original ones or reissues of the same toys. The only ones missing here are Hound and Mirage, which either haven't been remade or reissued, or I haven't been able to get my hands on them. You will notice that the older toys are a little bit smaller than the newer ones, and a little bit more detailed in some ways. You know, and that's good that the newer toys make a nicer display. But you know, this display of the original toys is pretty sweet too. So I mentioned earlier when we looked at Ironhide and Ratchet, the idea of a redeco, where the same model is used to create different characters and different toys by changing the colors and giving them different personalities. And redecos that happened in the original line have often been mirrored in the remakes as well, although there are exceptions to this. Um, but you can see again Ironhide and Ratchet from the original toys, and then the remade Ironhide and Ratchet. Again, it's the same model, just with different colors. Another example from the 1984 Autobots was Prowl and Bluestreak, being the same, and this too was repeated in their remakes. Again, it's the same toy, just with different colors. Now, one exception to this, the Autobot brothers, Sunstreaker and Sideswipe, were completely different molds in the original G1 toys, but they are the same in their remade form. And if they look slightly different, that's because the one side is rotated to the back to make them look as they did in their original form. But if you compare them side by side, you'll see that it is the same mold. Now, why that choice was made, and again, what makes Sunstreaker and Sideswipe brothers as opposed to other Transformers who are not related, still remains a mystery. But as we move forward and look at more of the Autobots that come out in 1985 and later, we will see that some of the same molds from the 84 line were redecoed again into newer characters for the later lines. So that's something we'll come back to and look at as we get further into the additional years of Transformers toys that were created. Okay, so I thought now would be a good time to take a look at the basement, where much, but not all, of my collections reside. There's a lot to take in, so we're just going to walk through, and I'm not going to narrate. And at the end is when you'll see the big Transformers collection. So here we go. Pretty cool.